Gracie Jiu Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. All right, welcome to episode 139 of the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today, my guest will be Roy Marsh, and we'll get to that in just a few moments. But before that, I just wanted to spend a couple of moments updating everyone on my situation. It's been a little while since I've done an episode, probably close to 3 months. For the last 7 years, I've done an episode. I averaged an episode once every 2 weeks, so approximately 2 per month for the last 7 years, and I've really enjoyed that. It's been my passion. But for various reasons, including that there are so many jiu-jitsu podcasts out there now, which is very different than when I started this one. So for that reason, as well as I've got a lot more things going on now in my life, so I've kind of slowed down. And we'll probably kind of do it at a much slower pace going forward. Not going to completely give up on doing the show, but just won't be doing it as frequently. So COVID was a crazy time, and during it, I tried to be as productive as possible. And I wrote a book, See You on the Mat. Hopefully some of you have had a chance to get that and read it. And another thing I did was go to real estate school. Last year, I became very interested in real estate investing. And I teamed up with my brother, and we bought a cabin in the Smokies around the Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee area, and started renting that out. And it's done really, really well. And it's also a great place to go spend some time with my family. And we're also just closing on a condo in Panama City Beach, Florida. So exciting things. I want to do a lot more of that. But I also got to thinking, hey, why not do some real estate as a career? I've been in the corporate world for some years now, and it's been a great gig, but I'm at a point where I'm not passionate about it. I don't really want to do it for many more years, and I'm getting older, want to kind of do things more on my terms. So I'm giving myself about 2 years to fully transition into that world, but we'll be definitely doing some in the meantime. So I would love to connect with people that are into real estate, especially that are jiu-jitsu practitioners. So if you're a listener and a real estate enthusiast, either as an investor or as a profession, reach out. I'd love to connect with you and see kind of what you're doing, what you're going to be doing in the future, etc. So hit me up. GracieJujitsuRocks@gmail.com. All right, excited about the interview with Roy Marsh. Roy is a very interesting and awesome person. If you're not familiar with him, you're in for a treat. In this interview, we talk about his background, getting started in martial arts and working up through black belt, and the early days of jiu-jitsu in North Carolina with the original TEAM ROC. We also talk about him deciding to move to Germany and starting a school there, what that's been like for him. We spend a lot of time getting into his philosophy. Roy is an incredible teacher and really takes a conceptual approach to teaching the art. So we dig into that quite a bit, talk about his instructional videos and who's had the biggest impact on his life. So I know you're going to enjoy getting to know him better. After the interview, make sure you stay tuned for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And without further ado, let's talk to Roy. All right, I'm speaking with Roy Marsh, owner and head instructor of Gracie Schwarzwald. And am I saying that right, Roy?
That's good. That's good. Schwarzwald.
Kind of close. Yeah. I have trouble with that for some reason, but and that's in Germany. We're going to talk about that. Definitely want to talk about your journey to get there, but let's just start by you taking us way back, where you grew up. I know you grew up in North Carolina. Tell us about growing up and what led you into martial arts and what that journey was like for you.
I was born in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and raised in the Fort Bragg Fayetteville area. And I think, for a lot of people, you either have a passion from the beginning for martial arts or you don't. And, as a kid, I was one of those kids, watching Kung Fu, the TV show, and also the Kung Fu theater all the time as a kid, and sort of, fantasizing in your head about being a Kung Fu master and all of that. So, I bounced around from some different martial arts as a kid whenever I could find somebody that would teach. I did the standard, year to 2 years of Taekwondo, various other things. But I didn't really get serious about it until I got to college. And then in college, I was actually, I went to NC State in Raleigh, and I joined the judo club there. And I really had a lot of fun with that. And from there, I actually, for a long time, I trained Kung Fu. I did train Kung Fu. I trained Wing Chun Kung Fu. Mm. And I was a Wing Chun instructor for actually quite a while. And I ran a school in Raleigh for a while. And during that time, I also did a little bit of Muay Thai with Scott Francis, who you may or may not know from the Triangle. He sort of brought Muay Thai to the Triangle. But I always still had that love of the grappling. And I had a friend of mine who, you would ask kind of for a long version, but this is turning out to be somewhat of a short version. But I had a friend of mine who started doing Gracie Jiu Jitsu, started doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu under Greg Thompson, who's hoist his first black belt. And it was kind of funny because there was a guy, I don't know how much you know about the martial arts history in the Triangle, but there was a guy named, I think, Danny Daniels, who was a Frank Shamrock guy.
I've met him and went to his place before. Sure did.
Yeah. And so it was funny because I was trying to decide between going to the Shamrock school or the Gracie Jiu Jitsu school just to try it out, because I really liked the idea of getting back into grappling. And my friend said, well, just come out with me to try the jiu-jitsu class. So I go there. It was the first time they ever had a day class. So I went out there, and it was literally me, my friend, and Spencer Canup. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I'll still always remember my very first class, which was, he goes, hey, so nice to meet you. Everything goes, just the three of us. And he goes, okay, come here. And he basically puts me in a standing guillotine. And he goes, yeah, here you go. He goes, okay, now let's roll. And so then we rolled, and he just smashed me. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't mean, but I realized I couldn't do anything.
Sure.
And I'd been lifting weights before that too, so I was a pretty big guy at that point. And I got out of there with my friend, and I just immediately fell in love with it. Some people, you have to be more, kind of bring them into the art easily, show them the sort of softer approach. Me, it was kind of like you hit me across the head, you go, isn't that cool? And I went, yeah, that's cool.
That's what I'm looking for.
That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. I think after all those years of training Wing Chun under Brian Edwards, it kind of brought that to the fore of just being an idiot to an extent. And so I fell in love with it and immediately just signed up. And then I met Greg and all the other people at Team ROC.
when you mentioned watching Kung Fu growing up, I mean, like, what kid didn't love that show, right? And want to be Kane. I mean, that was
Right.
I totally was right there with you. And I didn't know you did Wing Chun. I think I
Yeah.
knew you did other arts before, but I didn't know that. So that's very cool. And Danny Daniels, it's funny that you said that because I went to his place when he was actually in the working out of a gym that I went to for a while to work out, lift weights, and then he moved into another place, and I went down there and I asked him kind of the same question. I said, or similar to what you were, I was at a similar place as you. I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing Gracie Jiu Jitsu or this, and he was like, oh well, if you go that route, the Gracie Jiu Jitsu, you won't learn how to strike, but here you will. I had to say that because I know you're definitely going to school us on more about the whole depth of Gracie Jiu Jitsu that some people don't realize. There's a lot more to it, and strikes are definitely a big part of it. I just thought that was funny, that reply. So let's move
Yeah.
into your the days with Greg Thompson and Team Rock. Just tell us about that.
Yeah. And I kind of bring that up just because I'm sort of, you don't really make a decision you make some decisions on the path of your life, but some things are just completely happenstance. If I decided that day to go to Danny Daniels first, I might have signed up with him and gone a completely different path. Um, so it's just, each step of the way, it's a big part of my life is not necessarily planned. It's just kind of sometimes, happy coincidences and sometimes bad coincidences. But, I remember I tell everybody this, I met Greg. You've met Greg before, right?
Yes.
Or have you? Okay, very nice guy.
Yeah.
Very nice guy. Always very, hey buddy, how you doing? Which kind of threw me off because the first time we rolled, it's not that he was mean by any mean, but he just completely overwhelmed me and I couldn't do anything. And I was like, wait a minute, what happened to the nice guy? Um, and I really fell in love, and this would be in 2000. Um, so back then, the school was being run out of a place in Hillsborough, like this old rundown building that was in front of it was like basically kind of a truck stop restaurant that was, I think, not even in business anymore. And, kind of the back in my day kind of conversation, but there was no air conditioning, no heating in the building. So in the summers, it was brutal. In the winters, it was brutal.
Oh yeah.
Um, and everybody was just, there wasn't the thing with Greg's instruction was, people will say, okay, there was a lot less technique back then. Um, and they'll say that as if it's a bad thing. And on one hand, it is, right? There was just simply less information. But on the other hand, it's a bit like the internet, right? How much information is out at your disposal these days? A ton of information.
Certainly.
Have we gotten smarter? Have we gotten better informed? No, not necessarily, right? Because there's so much bad information
Mm-hmm.
out there as well. And you don't have time to think about anything. You read one story, then immediately you can read another story, another story. You don't have time to think about something.
Yes.
The thing with Greg was, like, if you roll with any of the old school Team Rock guys, their stack pass is brutal because we probably covered it one or two times a week, right? Because, we didn't have 30, 40, 50 different passes. It was, you got to get good at this pass because this is one of a dozen passes you're going to use. And so we really dialed it in. There's still people ask me all the time, like, man, where do you learn? You know so much about this particular move. How did you come up with a lot of this? And a lot of it was just Greg had so much of that too, right? We just spent a lot of time taking a technique, and you couldn't go by the philosophy of like, well, do this technique, but then it'll fall apart at this point. So you got to go to this other technique to build off of it. And when that falls apart, you transfer to this other technique. It was no, we got to make this technique work as far as you can possibly make it work. And then you can transfer it to another technique if you want. And that really is kind of the ethos of my entire jiu-jitsu game,
Mm.
is trying to make every single technique work to its maximum, work as broadly as it can and as deeply as it can. As I say, there's a wide breadth of jiu-jitsu now, but it seems like there's less of a depth of jiu-jitsu.
I completely agree with that.
So, we may have learned half the techniques that a blue belt might learn these days, but every one of them, it's why a lot of things I'm going to say might come across as arrogant. I don't mean them that way. It just means um, sort of my experience of what I see is being done right and being done wrong is I get a ton of people coming to me and, doing lessons and saying, man, I thought I knew how to do this move. I realized I don't know how to do this move at all because you showed me all these aspects to it. I had guys come from Sweden one time to train with me, Globetrotter guys, and I may have told the story before, but we went over stack pass that night, ironically, bringing up the story. And they told me their coach said, don't do the stack pass. It never works against anybody good. And so they did never really learn it, other than just kind of a very basic idea they sort of picked up at some point. And so we dialed it down that day. And they write me a few weeks later, they're like, man, we're at the gym stack passing everyone. And the point was, yeah, it didn't work because you didn't learn it well. Right. So as Pedro Valencia Sr. or Jr., imagine the hubris to blame the technique and not the person.
That's good.
Yeah. So a lot of my early training was, rolling with and training with guys that were really strong, really athletic. I mean, that's true of all schools, but, and, we just rolled a lot. There wasn't, I'm kind of rambling, but one thing, I break instruction into three parts. You're going to see it almost every school you go to. You're going to have instruction, you're going to have drilling, and then you're going to have sparring, right?
Yeah.
The school I came from, and the way I still kind of teach, is heavy on instruction, okay amount of drilling, and then heavy on sparring. I think a lot of schools these days are low to okay on instruction, heavy on drilling, and heavy on sparring. And I think that's for particular philosophy reasons that we can get into later.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of instruction, a lot of deep instruction, maybe not a million techniques, but a lot of deep instruction on each position. It's my friend Jake Whitfield would say, he'll see these videos from John Danaher or Silver Fox or Henry Akins, and people have their minds blown, and he'll say, man, this is stuff we learned within our first 3 months. And these brown belts and black belts have their minds blown because they never learned these fundamentals.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I do certainly respect those guys as well and their ability to instruct. But I think you bring up a good point. There's the tendency today, and the internet has made it probably worse or contributed to it. Is like you said, breadth or broad, but not depth, not digging deep holes in every aspect or everything. So to your point about the stack pass, taking one thing and taking it to the max. I think that's missing in a lot of places today where they may, just like when you said some people are okay on the instruction and then heavy on drilling and then the rolling. If you're heavy on drilling, but you haven't really explored all the details and the depth of a position or a technique, you're just drilling a lot that may not be the best way to do the technique, right? So it's kind of at a loss.
Yeah, and so the philosophy reason I get into that is I think the reason is because the vast majority of schools are focused on competition. Maybe not competition as a goal, but competition as a mindset, right? Mm-hmm. So they're teaching a competition style of jiu-jitsu, even if students don't compete that much, right? So you're focused on, time limits, and we can get into this stuff later. And so what happens is, in order to, like I used to tell my people, I could build a good competition purple belt in 3 years, but I can't build one of my purple belts in under 6. And the reason being is, if I want to make a good competition purple belt, I can leave out a ton of stuff. Right? I don't have to teach you any self-defense. I don't have to teach you how to do takedowns, really. I don't have to teach you certain kinds of guards, certain kinds of top control mentalities. We'll work on get to a couple main positions, sweep, get your points, work to a couple positions on top. That's pretty, and then you just drill it until you're really good at that game plan. And so what happens is, when you build a game plan, you don't actually have to understand what you're doing, right? To a large extent, you just build a flow chart. I say, okay, do this. If this, he's going to probably block one of these three ways.
Right.
Whichever one of these three ways, go down this flow chart. And then this flow chart. And we build out just a basic flow chart, and then you just drill it, drill it, drill it, drill it. But at no point are you really understanding the why of anything you're doing. Right. And that's how a lot of, I think, schools operate is just,
I
you just
totally agree.
work off a flow chart. And
Yes.
so, as you know, I'm a big, big conceptual jujitsu person. I want my students to understand why they're doing every single thing they are so that they can adapt beyond a flow chart. If something comes up and I haven't explained it to them, they understand the underlying mechanics of a particular, the mechanics of a choke. All chokes operate off certain foundational mechanics. All all sweeps operate under certain foundational mechanics. So I take the time to explain those things to them so they don't have to exactly do what I say. You do this, 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 because it might not be in a situation where the reality is exactly like I said. And they can't go, well, wait a minute, I wasn't allowed to get this grip or that grip. How do I do the sweep? Right? It won't matter as long as you understand the force, the block, etc. You can adapt on the fly because you actually understand what you're doing versus I'm just going off of, like I teach you how to say a few
Right.
words in another language. You could get by just saying those few words, but you can't speak the language.
Exactly. You can't really internalize it and make it your own and make it dynamic and spontaneous. I agree with you. I've seen a lot of cases where people did really well in competition and even at a low level, and they weren't well rounded at all, but they knew how to do a couple of things, like you said, their game plan, and a couple of things better than the other people at their level, and they can impose that. And that's all they needed, but they really didn't have a broad, understanding of all the finer points and aspects of jiu-jitsu. Conversely, if you take someone who has all these physical attributes, like let's say a wrestler comes in, really strong wrestler, they may be able to dominate when you're talking about points and positions, but they don't know all the aspects of jiu-jitsu. A lot of people get promoted on that kind of just performance. But we'll get
Oh,
more into your philosophy in a couple of minutes because I love the conceptual way that you present to people and educate people. But I'll go back to where you were in North Carolina and then how that led up to you moving over to where you are now in Germany.
yeah. So I was training with Greg and those people for quite a while, and then Greg left to move to Fort Bragg full time. He had been training the U.S. Air Marshals, and then he started working with soldiers on Fort Bragg. So he moved there full time, and then Spencer took over the school. And then at some point, Spencer actually moved down to Fort Bragg too, and the school started expanding. We opened in Chapel Hill and in Raleigh. There had been one in Eden and on Charlotte, and it just kept spreading out. And so I was training at the school in Chapel Hill with Jake Whitfield and Mozzie and all those people. And at one point, this is kind of really jumping along. Jason Culberth had opened a school in Raleigh, and he said, "Hey, would you mind coming over and basically being my assistant instructor?" And so I went over there, started teaching, helping to teach with him. And I don't know, a year in or something, he said, "Hey, what is your plans long term?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to open my own school eventually." And he said, "Well, because Greg is looking for somebody to open basically on the other side of Fort Bragg." So Greg was in Fayetteville, and on the side of Fort Bragg is a place called Southern Pines. So that he would kind of have two schools on either side of base. So if soldiers wanted to come off base and train, they could. And so I ended up moving down to Southern Pines and opening my school, which is still there. And that was, Team ROC Southern Pines. And so I taught there for, I'm trying to think when I started teaching there. I think it was 2005, maybe, that I started teaching there. And then in 2017, so what is that, 12 years, I'd been, I'd spent my whole life in North Carolina, pretty much, except for a couple of years in Missouri and I think 1 year in Florida. And and Southern Pines is close enough to my home, Fort Bragg. I really just wanted to see something else of the world. And I really love traveling. And so my father had been, my parents had actually met in Germany. And my father was a big fan of all things German. We had all around the house. And so I had decided I wanted to move someplace and open another school and someplace where I could travel. Because I always remember this story. I traveled to do a seminar one time down in South Georgia. And I went down there and drove down there and did the seminar. It was great, great people. But I remember it was Augusta, Georgia, I think it was. And I remember looking around and going, man, this looks pretty much exactly like, a decent sized city in North Carolina. The culture is almost the same. Everything's the same. And it was like an 8-hour drive. And, I wanted more variety. So I thought, I really wanted to live in Europe, move to Europe. I knew Germany didn't have a lot in jiu-jitsu. England has a fair amount of jiu-jitsu. Scandinavia has a fair amount of jiu-jitsu. So I decided I would try Germany and open a school here because, and so
I
it was,
just gotta say, I think that's so cool that you said, "Hey, I want to go see more variety. I want to go somewhere else," and you're just like, "Hey, I'm doing it." And I remember, I think it was like a week or so before you were moving, I actually reached out to you and I said, "My job has me expanding the territory, and I'm going to be able to spend some time down that way from time to time." And I wanted to connect with you and do some privates. And you're like, "Man, I'm heading to Germany." I'm like, "Wow." I'm like, "That's so cool." And it's bad timing for me. But anyway.
Yeah, I talked about it for a long time, but I finally was able to make it happen. And some people didn't know, so they were like, "Hey," I've actually had people write me like, "Hey, can I drop by tonight?" I was like, "Well, about 6,000 miles away."
Right.
But yeah, so I picked up my family. Thankfully, my wife telecommutes, so she can work from anywhere in the world. And I came over first for a year, and then they came after. And I was first in Munster, which is kind of central, a little bit north of center Germany. But I really kind of wanted to be more in the south. So we moved down here to the south. We're in Baden-Württemberg, and it fits exactly what I was dreaming of, which is I'm an hour away from Switzerland. I'm an hour away
Nice.
from France. I'm about 2 to 3 hours away from Austria.
That's
So,
great, man.
the time it would take in North Carolina to drive from Raleigh to Greensboro or Raleigh to Charlotte or Raleigh to Fayetteville, I could be in a different country with a
Love it.
completely different culture.
Love it.
And I love that. And so, and of course, I'm right here in the Black Forest, so there's a great amount of hiking and outdoor stuff. So it's kind of an ideal thing for me.
That sounds wonderful. I lived in Japan before. I'm from Florida, the Panhandle, but I've had a chance to live in a lot of places like Georgia, Alabama, Texas, California, Japan. Visited Germany years ago for 2 months in the Army, and
Uh-huh.
as you know, last year before COVID, my daughter and I had decided we were going to go over to Germany in June.
Right.
So I reached out to you. I wanted to come train with you, and there's a couple other people I was going to train with while I was there, and then do some interviews, and didn't get to. But I was so psyched for that trip. It was going to be great, but I don't know when it'll happen, but it still definitely has to happen. So how's it been? You said it's been everything kind of you expected, which is awesome. It's not always the case with some people, the expectations, they go somewhere and it's very different. So I'm glad it's lived up to what you wanted and what you envisioned. Tell us a little bit about how that school's going, and then maybe we'll get a little more into your philosophy.
Yeah. So, yeah, the funny thing is I tell people that when I first got to Germany, I was amazed by how similar it is, how similar in some ways it is, how quickly I can adjust as an American. And then the longer I'm here, it's also how strange Germans are. So, not in a bad way, just, there's certain things where it's just, okay, yes, this is a very different culture that views things differently. Um, like I said, I spent the first year, I had a school in Munster, but I decided to shut it down and move south to Baden-Württemberg because that's really where I wanted to be. The the thing is with Europe, and I knew this coming over, there's a club mentality of martial arts, meaning the government will often pay people, support people for having a martial arts club. But in that way, you don't really, people will pay $150 for a year of martial arts training, in essence. And so it's not really like a business type thing. It's more like the old days of, the YMCA, somebody's
Right.
dad teaching. So the idea, it's getting to be this, but it's not so much a culture idea of like, wait, this is actually a service that I have to pay for real money. Um, and I knew that, like I charge quite a bit less than I would in the US. So that said, my rent at the moment is quite a bit less than any place I would charge. I'd be in the US too. So it's not a bad thing. The differences are, number. One, this is true with jiu-jitsu, I think, around the world, but the people here, the people who've come train jiu-jitsu with me, I have almost across the board been really great people. I haven't really dealt with kind of like back in the really old days where, jiu-jitsu was having to prove itself, where you'd have people come into school wanting to fight you. You don't really get that anymore. And you certainly don't get it here. Germans are, as people, interpersonally, and especially for somebody coming from Fort Bragg, Fayetteville, they're very non-confrontational, right? So they're very polite, very non-aggressive, right? In fact, I had a real problem when I first moved here because Germans will stare you in the eye, and you see, you laugh. As an American, man, if another man stares you in the eyes, there's really two things that's going to happen. He's either got to give you that nod, like the "what's up,"
Right.
in which case it differs, or you're going to have a fight. So I was walking around keyed up all the time. These guys stare me in the eyes, and I'm like, "What? What do you want?"
What are you looking at?
It was really hard for me to bring that down.
Yeah.
And it's not a confrontational thing at all. But my whole life experience was this is a challenge. The Germans, by and large, on average, are much more fit than the average American. Health and outdoor activities is much more a part of the culture. Americans win on the extremes, right? We have people who are in far worse shape than the average German or the spectrum of Germans. And we also have groups of people that are in far, far better shape than the spectrum of Germans. So our spectrum is just wider. But the average German is in good shape. The difference with the jiu-jitsu scene, because there is jiu-jitsu here, and it's quite a bit different in some regards. One is, of course, all European, but certainly German jiu-jitsu started later than it did in, say, America. And so it's got more of a sport competition focus. So you had jiu-jitsu in America starting in depending on when you want to look at it, the 80s and 90s. And it was still pretty heavily focused on fighting and self-defense. And there was sport, but it wasn't like you did it and immediately, you show up at Hickson's class and he's like, okay, let's go ahead and get you understanding the point system and let's do this and let's show you how to pull guard, go to De La Hiva and, get your advantage. But here, it never really went through that period. It was just straight into jiu-jitsu as kind of a sport. And so, I find a lot of people who practice it here are learning it that way. And now that's common in a lot of American schools now too.
Right.
I'm not saying that Germany is alone. It's true around the world, but just that they started later. So their viewpoint of what the art is different than people who trained, out of America.
Gotcha. So that leads us into, I want to hear more about your philosophy. One of the things that I think is really great about you is, and why I follow you on social media and that kind of thing is, your conceptual approach. And like you referred to before is the why. And I want to read a couple of your posts that resonated with me and then just have you kind of expand on that if you would.
Okay, sure.
First one was this. You said, I had someone who used to train with me tell me once, you're not actually that good. You just get past my guard and then I can't get out from under you and you just do the same submissions. I just get too tired to stop it. And then you wrote, I understood what he meant. To him, jiu-jitsu is about movement. The more movement, the more better your jiu-jitsu was. To him, I wasn't good, because I wasn't doing slick 10-step guard passes, and then on top I wasn't dancing around switching through as many positions as possible. And I wasn't telling him to jump around too and have his chance to play the game so that we could try to outmove each other, out-technique each other. Anyways, because I wasn't beating him under his definitions of what is good, then I wasn't good. I just let his criticism go. To him, what was happening in our roles, his inability to escape or not get caught with the same things over and over, was not intentional and wasn't because of anything I was doing. It was somehow just accidental and would eventually stop happening. And then he would be able to outclass me with all the slick moves he had ready. And you go further into it, but I love that. Respond a little bit, elaborate on that and how that fits into your philosophy.
Yeah, so my philosophy, which I'm so thankful that I learned and that I've practiced my whole career, is this. I teach jiu-jitsu is not a submission art. It's an art of control. My students hear me say this all the time. Control leads to predictability. And then effective control leads to, and this is important, effective control does not lead to submission. Effective control leads to a resolution of the conflict. Okay, so this could be a submission. It could just be me pinning you and negotiating. It could be me deploying weapons if we're military or police. It could be me striking. Okay, but it all starts with control, because here's the thing. I tell people is I should be able to beat you if you have better cardio, you're stronger, you're faster. And here's the important one. You have better technique than me. And the only way I can beat you if you have better technique, better cardio, better strength, better speed, better flexibility, because I cannot gain those things in a roll. What I have to do is bring you down. Okay, so this is crucial, right? I think Grandmaster Elio even talked about this. If I start here at, let's say, 2 and you start at 10, and we burn at the same rate, I'll hit bottom before you will. Okay, so my jiu-jitsu has always been this. If we compete equally, there's no way that in a roll I can get stronger. There's no way I can get faster. None of these things. So I have to constantly limit those things and constantly grind you down and take those things away. Fatigue takes all of those things away. So my entire art is about control and pressure, because I can't fight you on equal terms. I'm not getting younger. None of us is, right? And so this is why I think you see a lot of gyms, they're focused on this I'm going to outpace you, outspeed you, outstrength you. And I look at like a school's Instagram page or a guy's Instagram page or Facebook page, and what do you see? You see tons of gyms of guys working out all the time, flexing, becoming complete beasts. And that's great, but that's completely anathema to the whole spirit of the art in my mind of, okay, I'm going to be the superior athlete. Okay, because the original self-defense mindset is what? I can't be the superior athlete. Right? I will not be the superior athlete. And maybe I'm the superior athlete for a while, right? But what happens eventually? You get older or weaker or something, and you're no longer the superior athlete. I think even Keith Owens talked about that, right? Yes. The fact that you're getting instructors now who are getting older and they can't keep up the pace and the athletic domination, so they start to go, oh, well, they're kind of giving up on jiu-jitsu. Or guys will say, well, I'm just going to do a defense mindset now, right? I give up winning. I'm just going to play defense, as if those are your two options. So my philosophy has always been, I need to control you and control comes through connection, right? This is basic jiu-jitsu. The better connected I am to you, not only the more control I have, but the more predictability. And this is crucial, right? If you and I are jumping around at each other, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what parts you're going to attack. I don't know where you're going to move. Now I can try to outpace you and play that game, which is what a lot of people do, or I can limit your movement so that when you do, and I can limit your movement and be so well connected to you that when you do move, I feel you trying to move, which means I have time. I don't have to be faster than you to prepare to meet you where you're going to exploit the movement. A good example might be, if I have you in side control and you roll away from me to turtle. Well, I can try to jump quickly and jump on your back, but I have certain ways that I'll slow your roll away so that maybe you get all the way to your knees, but it took you 3 seconds, which gives me plenty of time to, get a hook in or transfer to the other side or get into a grip that I need. So everything I do is about, I teach a lot of things that I make my students remember. I won't say make them remember, but they hear so often that they remember. One is jiu-jitsu is an art of control, but one is I talk about the 4 things you need to control in every single conflict. And you may have heard me talk about this. It's distance, timing, or distance, angle, timing, and pace. Right? Every technique that you're ever going to learn in jiu-jitsu or in fighting is in service of those 4. Right? So distance. If I'm trying to pin you and I can't close the distance, it's going to be hard for me to pin you. Angle. If I can't get the right angle, I'm not going to be able to effectively break down your structures or finish a submission or escape a submission. Timing is obvious, right? If I wait too long, I can't do what it is I need. I can't recognize your movement or my opportunities. And then pace. If I can't slow you down and I have to fight at your speed, you're dictating the speed, you're probably going to win. So a big part of my game is this pressure and control. Because if I can weaken you, I don't have to spend all day in the gym trying to get stronger and faster and more flexible. I can't tell you how many people I see, who are older, who are like, man, I can't do jiu-jitsu anymore. I'm just, I can't keep up that pace. We're in class and it's go, go, go. I can't roll that way anymore. So I just need to quit. And I'm like, well, you're learning the wrong jiu-jitsu, right? I don't want to beat you on your terms. That's a fool's fight.
I love that. Yeah, they you hear people like that. It's kind of like, well, I guess I've had a good run. Now I better go learn to play golf. But it doesn't have to be like that. Yeah.
Or they're, like I saw some guys are like, well, just take testosterone therapy.
Oh, right,
and,
right.
Do all of this. I'm like, oh God, no.
Yeah.
Learn a different jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and that's why I love your jiu-jitsu, or not only your jiu-jitsu, but anybody that has that philosophy, because it seems like, and I know I've felt guilty before, and had conversations with people, and it contributed to me feeling guilty if I wasn't constantly moving. You know what I mean? And moving for the sake of movement, and first of all, it's a beautiful thing and a fun thing to watch people who are really flowing and doing a lot of things. It's very entertaining. And I'll do flow rolling, just to play with the movement. But the heart of my jiu-jitsu is very much like yours. The control and pin is, when you can control that, especially like you said, as you're getting older, you need to be as efficient and able to conserve as much as possible. And being able to really dictate that pace and that control, and as well as the other things you mentioned, is just key. I don't hear that emphasized enough, and I think some people actually think, just like the post I just read, that, well, you just controlled me, you didn't really out jiu-jitsu me, and you're like, what?
Yeah, I just submitted you the same way 10 times in a row, exactly. But it was an accident that it happened because there wasn't I didn't surprise you, right? That comes from, like, I remember rolling with Greg. Greg would do the same thing over to you over and over, and it didn't matter if you knew what he was trying to do. And to me, that was magic, right? If he caught me by surprise, like, I tell people, like, if somebody catches me by surprise, that's cool, right? I'm like, oh, wow, that's neat. But in some ways, I almost don't feel like I was beaten, right? If you do something and I know you're trying to do it and I can't stop you, it's like I used to tell my guys, like, if somebody come into school and you can tell they kind of have an attitude, I would tell them, do not submit them from your back, right? Because they will always have an excuse in their head. Well, if this had been a real fight, I would have done this, this, this.
Right.
I say, put them on their back, don't let them up, crush them. That's the power that will get through to them. What you were saying before this is another saying I have, which drives me crazy when you hear the term movement is jiu-jitsu. No. Bad movement is bad jiu-jitsu. Good movement is good jiu-jitsu. Right? Movement Every time you move, you expend energy, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So you have to be a miser with your energy. You have to be really, because I don't want to burn energy, and he's burning energy, but we're burning at the same rate. So here's the thing I tell people: like, if I don't know where I'm going and I don't know how to get there, I don't move. The analogy I use is you get in your car in the morning and it's on empty. Do you just start driving around hoping you'll find a gas station? Or do you get on your phone and go, okay, where's the nearest gas station? How do I get there? Okay, now I go. So that's what people don't. They just think, okay, well, nothing's really happening. I got to move, right? Then every movement is a chance for your opponent to escape because you're releasing control, right? So you're giving him a chance to escape. On bottom, of course, I want movement to happen, right? But on top, I don't. And so there's two counter training methodologies because I've done a lot of flow rolling. When you're training, you need to decide, are you going to flow roll? And that's a fantastic way to train because what does it do? It teaches you all the positions. It teaches you to be comfortable moving in and out of all the positions. But other times, you have to learn to be in the positions, right? I'm very comfortable passing half guard. Why? I spent for a long time never passing half guard. I would just sit in people's half guards. And I learned all the things they could try to do, all the ways they're going to try to sweep me, submit me, so that I wouldn't panic. Same with closed guard. I would close guard and just stay there, not lock down. I play the game. Because I tell people, if you are afraid of where you are, you'll take the first opportunity, not the best opportunity.
So true.
If you're mounted and you're panicking, what are you going to do? You're going to take the first chance to escape, which may put you in a worse position or a bit of trap. But if you're completely comfortable, the person can't submit you, you can breathe, you'll be like, okay, now's the time to escape. There's my opportunity. Instead of trying to force an opportunity.
And see, that's so foreign to so many people because for so many people with a competition mindset, you must get out of the guard right away. And the whole battle is if I can pass your guard or not. Whole matches are about that sometimes. Instead of, if someone can't pass your guard and rolling after a few minutes, I say let them pass and then let's do something else. Who cares? Because to your point about it, not going anywhere when you're on empty with the car and the control and the pinning, good jiu-jitsu should look kind of boring. And what I mean by that is it shouldn't be flashy and crazy, right? That's fun to watch. Really good jiu-jitsu to me. To people that don't understand jiu-jitsu and know all the intricacies, should look very boring, a match, because you're holding position, you're controlling, you're pinning, you're inching your way to something else, and you know when to move, and that might not be for a while, stuff like that. So it could seem very boring to people, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, because you have to decide. I mean, are you looking for an entertaining EBI type of jujitsu? That's perfectly fine to learn.
Right.
But I think your foundation needs to be. And again, I'm lucky I got the foundation I do because I can do the flow roll and all and the jumping around and stuff.
Yes.
But in a fight, I mean, look at it this way. I tell people this: why is Khabib the most feared fighter in MMA? It's not because of his striking. It's not even because of his takedowns. Right? It's because of his control. People know, okay, when I fight him, there are people who are better wrestlers than he is, better at taking you down. Okay. But what they know is if he gets his hands on you, you will not break that connection. And the whole time you will be carrying his weight and it will be exhausting. And the exhaustion is what scares people who have to fight him.
Yes.
Right. It's not the takedown and getting punched. It's the fact that the moment he puts hands on me, I'm never going to get an easy breath again. And for me, that's exactly the jiu-jitsu I train, which is when I get on top of you, it's not that I'm on top of you and holding you and pinning you. It's when I get on top of you, I put you in hell. That's my mindset. You will never be breathing well. Your spine will never be in alignment. You will never be pushing me in angles where you have strength. You will always be exhausting. You're draining the entire time. It's like Hickson said, right? In a fight, one of us is going to be comfortable.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And that's what I'm surprised. I've tapped so many people, being here in Germany and other places just to my mount. And that's not meant to bragging, but it's like when I started, I tapped all the time to Greg's mount. And I have people tell me now, like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible until I rolled with you.
That's
like,
awesome, man.
Who are you rolling with that you never tapped? to a side controller mount before, because they're doing you a disservice if you've never felt that kind of weight or pressure.
That's awesome. Another thing you said in a post, I'll just read a little small part of it, is when you fight and specifically grapple, you are a one-man army. You have to be the general, the spy, the scout, the propagandist, and the infantry. And what you said related to that is very interesting. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So this is so I want to talk about one thing really quickly that I
Sure.
wish people would do, and this
Absolutely.
will lead into all of what we've been talking about. If you and I roll for 5 minutes, I cannot develop my pressure game. I cannot develop my long form game. I cannot develop learning how to be in bad positions. Why? It's just not long enough, right? 5 minute rolls teach us both to be explosive. It also teaches us that we can take chances that we wouldn't necessarily take, right? So if you have me inside control, I can bridge and buck and go crazy, knowing in a few minutes I'll get a rest, right? But if I know that I'm stuck in side control and I bridge and buck and go crazy and it doesn't get me out, but I got 15, 20 more minutes before the timer gives me a break, I'm not going to do that, right? I'm going to be more intelligent about my movements.
Mm.
It also means if you're on top, you don't look at the clock and go, okay, I got 45 seconds. I got to submit the guy right now, right? You go, okay, I can work into building the structure, tightening them, putting them deeper into the trap so that the submission is easier, right? The deeper you put the person into pressure, I tell people all the time, a black belt submits to the same thing as a white belt. The only difference is you have to put the black belt under much more pressure to make those mistakes. We don't make some mystical, magical mistakes. We make the same exact mistakes. But it takes more to push us there. So if you're not learning the pressure game, you're stuck on trying to catch black belts or brown belts by surprise, which is only going to happen a couple times before they figure it out. But if you put them under pressure enough, anybody breaks, and they will make those mistakes. So I encourage people, I don't ever set timers at my school. Because if I do, well, one, you and I are both, if you take 10 people at a school, blue belt, white belt, brown belt, 45-year-old, 20-year-old, they all, if you're focused in competition, they all compete at different times anyway.
Right.
6 minutes, 10 minutes, 7 minutes. So the timer's not really going to help train you for the correct time. It also means, again, you can pace yourself, right? It's only 30 seconds. I can go crazy. It's only 30 seconds. He's got my back. I can just hold my collars and wait, and then the timer will go. But if you don't know how much time there is, you're not in a rush to submit. You can work the mount control, grind the person down. If you're stuck underneath, no one's going to save you. You got to figure out how to survive, get out. To me, training without timers is where you actually learn jiu-jitsu.
I believe that.
It's where you learn this, and it's where you learn the strategy that I'm talking about. Right. So the different things, right? So there's the private. I talk about the private is simply the base technique, the literally, I need an underhook. The private is your arm going under the arm. Go get under that arm. The sergeant is the one that sort of directs those things. Why do I need I need an underhook because I need to pin him. Get under there. It's tactics. Okay, so it's not an overall strategy. It's just literally the tactics in the moment. The general is the strategy, right? And that's where you have to roll. You can do some strategy before the roll, but you have to roll long form to build a strategy. And that might be something like, if I roll with you, you're a bigger guy than me. Probably not by much, but you're not a small guy, right? So I'm probably going to do things like maybe push the pace a little bit more, see if I can get you exhausted through movement. I'm going to put more weight, keep you more twisted so you can't use your power as much against me. There's certain strategies I'm going to use, right? If you have no neck, I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time trying to hunt necks. So that's kind of our overall strategy becomes based off of that. Now, as we roll, I pick up information from you. And this is where people don't. This is where I think if you train a striking art, you have an advantage. right? Because in striking arts, you're always reading your opponent, reading their reactions. In jiu-jitsu, because we can just grab somebody and throw them around, we're bad at reading reactions. And so if I roll with you, and let's say every time I put a hand in your collar, you defend a certain way, it's kind of like me throwing a jab and you slipping to the outside. Okay, well, now I know where I can throw it to, versus maybe you check my jab. So in this situation, okay, I know now I can maybe start setting up an arm lock, knowing that maybe every time I go hand in the collar, you block my arm, versus I go hand in the collar and you defend the hand in the collar. And so as we roll, I'm going to pick up more and more of this information. And that's what I call the spy. The spy goes and he looks at the situation, okay, maybe even test the situation, right? Like when I mount people, I'll give this away, but this is 100%. When I mount somebody, the side they turn to escape, if they try to do a knee elbow escape or an upa, that's always their best side, right? The first time they go, that's their best side. So I block them and I try never to let them look at that side again. So they have to work off their bad side.
Nice.
Right?
Giving away the secrets, Roy. You're giving away the secrets.
Yeah. But that's a simple thing, but
right.
that will take away a vast majority of their power. Again, I'm not trying to build myself up. I'm looking for ways to always weaken them.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
If you mount, does the guy try to oop or does he try to knee elbow? Does he try to bring a knee inside for like a leg lock position? The first things they do are going to be to tend to be the best things they're good at. Does he stand to pass? Does he stay on his knees to pass? All these sorts of things. And then you could build disinformation, which is what the propagandist is. It's propaganda, right? I can start to, play mind games with them. I can do things. I can check, like if I go, again, if I have side control with you, a lot of times I'll just grab your hand or wrist, make you think I want a kimura, right? Just to get you focused on that, right? So if I have you in side control, this is part of my control mindset. It's not just pinning someone. That's physical. It's a couple things. So if I have you in side control, let's say I've got a tight side control. What is your goal when I have you pinned in side control?
To create movement and escape opportunity.
Escape, right?
Create space.
Escape. Okay. What happens if I cross face you really hard and I drive your face where it feels like it's breaking, turning away? What's your focus then?
Taking the pressure off and or the pain. Yep.
Yeah. What happens if I have side control and maybe I slide my hand across your neck for sort of a butcher style choke? What's your focus then? Worry about the choke, right?
Exactly.
What happens to escape? It moves down your priority list.
Yes.
So I'm making it harder for you to escape, not just through pinning you, but I control your priorities. This is something I'm big about. I want to control your priorities. So I'm always doing this through several ways. And this is something I'll talk about in my instructional, but off balancing you is one way. Pain or discomfort is another way. Threat of submission, threat of advancement of position, and of course, submission threats. All of those I can use to control your priorities. I have you in that same side control. You're thinking about escaping, right? Yeah. What happens if I slide my knee a little bit onto your stomach? Well, now you're thinking, oh, he's going to mount, so I got to worry about blocking the mount.
Right.
Escaping side control now moved down to number 2 on the list. So this is what I mean about sort of I can start to build propaganda to get you worried about things you shouldn't be worried about.
That's
or
great.
That to get you not to worry about the things you should, to get you not to focus on the things you should be focused on.
Right. That's great. And you mentioned your
what's that?
And you mentioned your instructional. Let's talk about those for a little bit. So that one you alluded to was your upcoming one about pins and control.
It's going to be on my whole pressure and control game.
Pressure and control. All right. Looking forward to that one. I know you've got a few already out, the guillotine code and the pins escapes, which I've had a chance to review and watch many times, the pin one.
You did a very kind review of it, yes.
Kind but accurate. I loved that one. I loved the simplicity, but the depth, like we were talking about earlier. And it started out with some very fundamental things, movements like shrimping and even basic headlock escapes that I had done, for years, and do it pretty decently. But I really got some really great details and some gems from that, and it was just awesome. And I've gone back when I'm in the airport or up in the an airplane. I'm usually watching jiu-jitsu videos, so I've gone back and watched that several times, and each time I can say I definitely pick up new things, either brand new or I'm reminded of things that I need to focus on. So really great. Can't recommend that enough. And I'm sure the Guillotine Code, which I haven't watched, is just as good. And excited about the upcoming one. That's going to be great.
Yeah, that's going to be. Yeah, I did I got the four. I did a free movement one. I did the seminar, the escape seminars. I did a back seminar last year that I put up there. And then of course the Guillotine Code, and then this one is really going to be kind of. It's a little daunting to me. I'm because it's going to be sort of my biggest thing ever. The Guillotine Code is 5.5 hours long, and this one is looking like it'll be at least 10 hours long.
Wow.
Uh, because it's going to cover everything. It's going to cover. I thought like people have been like, you should sell it separately in the pieces, and I may have to do that to an extent. But what I'm afraid of is the way I teach is I hate. I see no point in buying instructionals where it's each technique is about 2.5 minutes long, and it's what a friend of mine called it's people who demonstrate, they don't teach. They go, okay, man, you can put the foot here, you do this, you sweep him over. Okay, next technique. Okay, you put the foot here, you sweep, he blocks, you do this. You don't really get much from that. For me, I want to break everything really deep down. And so for this one, mount, back, side control, the way I hold it, the mechanics, the maintenances, the way I exert pressure in all these positions, my whole conceptual. So for me, it's important that they actually understand the concepts instead of just going and like, let me see how to do this one move, because it won't be as effective if you don't understand everything that led up to that move, of why I do the move that way. And that way, if the move isn't exactly working, you can still take away, my concepts of misalignment, where I put my weight, how I break down structures, how I deal with underhooks, how I fatigue people, why I fatigue people. But I'm hopefully as soon as I finish, I'm shooting my white belt curriculum right now, and as soon as we finish that, hopefully I can start shooting the pressure and control one next.
Excellent. I'll definitely be getting that one. And it sounds like it goes right back to that notion that you said earlier about jiu-jitsu as an art of control, not submissions, and the submissions come through the control. So love it, man. And definitely we'll be looking for that. Before we close, Roy, I know there's been a lot of people that I'm assuming there's been a lot of people throughout your life at various times that have impacted your life and contributed to your growth and success. And I know you can't possibly name everybody right now, but who comes to mind as one of the biggest inspirations or the biggest impacts on your life? And this could be on or off the mat.
I mean, there's so many people, so I'm gonna name a few if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Jason Culberth is one. It's funny, when Jason and I first met, I hated him, as a lot of people will when they first meet him, because he really likes to poke at you and kind of make sure that you stand up for yourself. But he was in a lot of ways my primary coach for a long time. I really got a lot of the mindset of mastering the fundamentals from him. Same with Greg Thompson and Jake Whitfield. Those all had a huge impact on me. Dave Camarillo has had a huge impact on me. He actually was one of the people that was most influential on my style of teaching. When I first met him and trained with him, you could see that he actually, I have a saying I use that I picked up from him, which he would always ask. He'd teach something and goes, do you understand? Do you understand? Not just, can you do the move, but do you understand? And that really was a big thing for me, was when he would say, not show me side control, explain to me what you're trying to do here. Instead of, yeah, I hold like this because this guy told me to hold like that. For me, everything I do now is I break down the opposites, right? I teach people to learn to reverse engineer. So if I want to hold you down, I learn how you escape. If I want to submit you, I learn how you escape. If I want to escape, I learn how you submit me. So that I don't just go that, X famous person said I should pass guard like this, or X famous person said I should do a choke like this.
Right.
I actually want to understand the pros and cons of it and build it myself. So those people, I think, are probably in many ways the most influential in my jiu-jitsu career.
And you want to respond to that question, not jiu-jitsu related? Who would you say has really had a major impact?
My father-in-law has been had a huge impact on me because he was a martial artist, or he is a martial artist as well, and he is the one that really helped me kind of open the school in Southern Pines. We opened the school together. I probably wouldn't have been able to do any of that without his help. So in a lot of ways, he's probably been the one that's helped me most realize my dreams. He's in martial arts, but I'll kind of say he's outside jiu-jitsu because he doesn't teach jiu-jitsu. And so I'd say he's probably the one. And of course, if I don't say this, I'll get in trouble. My wife also, of course, and my daughter right now, she's 6. And as much as that sounds cliche, it really is, so much fun kind of, revisiting the world through her and kind of realizing, what you might think is stressful or important or all of that really isn't.
I totally get that. And we could have a whole podcast just on parenthood and what that means and the impact that has on someone, because it's like nothing else in the world.
I think it also, not to jump in, but I think it's also like if you have kids or you teach kids in jiu-jitsu, I think it really changes, or it should change, if you didn't already have how you view jiu-jitsu, right? In the sense of, I know a lot of people who, once they started teaching kids, they started coming to me going, man, I really need help on the self-defense because I now see how important it is.
Absolutely.
So that's something that I think is a really valuable. It kind of recenters you on what the art is about when you think about kids.
Totally agree. Last thing, do you have a favorite quote that means a lot to you or that you live by, or do you have a favorite or favorite books that you would recommend?
I have a jiu-jitsu quote.
Sure.
That it's not necessarily a word for word quote, but it's something I like because it sort of helps me with the way I teach and the way I train and the way why I love jiu-jitsu. And this is that basically the mat is a microcosm of the world. If you're a bully on the mat, you're probably bullying the world. If you're fearful on the mat, you're probably fearful in the world. But the great thing is we can change that on the mat, which means we can change it in the world. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that, man. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, listen, man, I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your insights, spending the time, letting us get to know you better, your class act. I'm a big admirer of you, of your work, and of the impact that you're having on people's lives, all around the world. So keep up what you're doing, and much respect, my friend.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And really enjoy how you've built your podcast, and I look forward to each episode. And it's I like the positivity you bring to the community.
Thanks, man. That means a lot. It really does. Hoping to come visit you in Germany sometime.
Yeah, definitely come on over. Go hiking. I'm moving to a new town. I mean, it's just 8 kilometers down the road, and the school won't change or anything, but it's a beautiful little village. It's actually a kind of a getaway village people come to for relaxation.
It doesn't have doesn't have the natural baths and things like that.
It has the big solarium, the baths, nice. Everything. So yeah, we can train and then go lay in the hot salt baths.
Awesome. Sounds excellent. All right, brother. Right. Thanks so much. And again, much respect and be well.
All right. Take care, my friend.
All right. See ya. All right, really enjoyed that conversation with Roy. What an exceptional and very interesting person he is. It's always a pleasure to speak with him. If you ever get the chance to train with Roy, I highly, highly recommend you take advantage of that opportunity. And by the way, Roy was also a guest on episode 104, along with Mark Cookrow, where they discussed creating a positive academy culture. So if you haven't heard that one, definitely worth giving it a listen. So go ahead and check it out. All right, if you haven't checked out my book, See You on the Mat, I suggest you get a copy today. It's available on Amazon in paperback edition, Kindle edition, as well as on Audible for those of you who prefer to listen to your books. The Breathing for BJJ program is alive and well. The program is a 31-day program designed to dramatically increase your functional capacity to breathe and thereby take your jiu-jitsu to a whole new level in doing so. You can find out more at www.breathingforbjj.com. All right, up next is the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Time now for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Today we'll be featuring the audio portion of a video entitled Make an Impact.
When we're laying on our deathbed, you're not going to worry about how much money you had, how much power you had, how much prestige. You're going to see that that was all game, that was all an illusion. The only thing that's going to matter is the impact you had on other people's lives.
We are all on a separate journey. But the beautiful thing about our life here on this earth is at my funeral, they ain't going to talk about my success. They're going to talk about who Nick was and how Nick lived and how Nick loved and encouraged.
Success is incredibly important, but even more important than success, it's having an impact. It's knowing you haven't walked the planet in vain. It's knowing that because you've been here, you've blessed lives, you've developed people, and you have made the world a better place.
The effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. Everything you gain in life will rot and fall apart, and all that will be left of you is what was in your heart.
Life is a mirror, and life gives us not what we want. Life gives us who we are. When you were born, you cried while the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way that when you die, the world cries while you rejoice.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you feel like you're benefiting from the show and want to show your support, you can support us on our Patreon page, and a link in the show notes. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.